Hi everyone, welcome back to the AI Community Cast by Neo4j. I'm very excited to be here today with Carl Moberg from Avassa, with the Swedish roots of Neo4j in Malmo, and now the Avassa roots from Stockholm. So thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you on.
My pleasure.
So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you and the company and what you have to share with us today.
Absolutely. Above and beyond being from Stockholm, which is a good start, we have a platform that helps enterprises manage applications in container format. People usually think of Docker containers.
Yeah, of course.
At the edge. And what we mean by the edge is two things. First, it's not the cloud, so it's not in your private data center or any of the hyperscaler data centers.
Yeah.
It's usually in many locations, where
Right.
each location has a kind of limited set of compute resources. So you can think of things like retail stores, quick serve restaurants. You can think of oil and gas. You can
Okay.
think of electricity grids. If you put these glasses on, you'll realize that there's a whole lot of compute power with a whole lot of software running outside of the traditional cloud.
Yeah.
And that's usually what people call edge computing. And when teams are asked to actually start managing the life cycle of those applications, they quickly realize that their cloud tools doesn't really cut it.
Yeah.
So they need to look for something, and here we are. So we help both infrastructure teams and application teams to get the same kind of scale and comfort level that they have with the cloud, but running the applications at the edge.
So what are people most sort of nervous about when you start talking to them about bringing in your capabilities?
I think they are, so it is I will say that this problem space is fairly recent.
Okay.
So the first thing they're worried about is that it's hard to find inside of their organizations and outside too, people with lived experience, operational experience. And that's terrifying,
Yeah.
because there's no like well-known processes or standards. So that really puts them into kind of the mode of wanting to try and understand more first before they make any decisions.
So there's a lot of education that goes in when you're
Thank
first
you.
meeting
There's
with
a
clients.
lot of it.
Yes.
It's a huge sound of
We
needed
have that with
education.
graphs
Yes,
too.
yeah, I can,
so we
I can
totally
imagine.
understand.
Yeah.
They don't know how much they need you.
No, exactly.
They don't know
and
they have
also
that issue.
it is kind of peeling an onion, because there are intuitive things to think about, like how do we get the software out, how do we start it?
Yep.
That is easy to kind of think of, but then we can help them think of things like what does it mean to monitor the health of an application running in 5,000 locations?
Exactly.
What does green mean? Does that mean
Yeah.
that everything is connected, up and running? Like how do you
Yeah,
think in
yeah.
a more nuanced fashion about the entire operational life cycle of
it.
stuff that's running in very many locations?
So once the system is put in place, what are people the most surprised to learn?
Good one. I think, okay, that's a good one. Actually, I think what they're most surprised to learn is this. Let's see if I can communicate this clearly. Is that if you think about what kind of applications are running at the edge, let's pick something people kind of know because they've seen it, is inside of retail stores. There's a lot of software, ranging from the point of sales, which is a very obvious piece of software, to things like visitor counters that count people coming in and make sure there are no queues or lines.
Yep.
Both of those applications have corresponding components in the cloud, right?
Okay.
They're not fully standalone. They talk to something in
Right.
the cloud, both of them, right? And what happens now is the application team needs to realize that I now suddenly have a service or an application that have components both centrally and at the edge.
Yes.
And they need to be life cycled with the same cycle.
Got
So
it.
if they want to deploy a new feature, it usually means updating the software in both locations.
Right.
So what they have to do is to start to think about what is the main engine of change across my infrastructures, which usually comes down to the CI/CD pipeline,
Right.
right? But that's usually new to them.
Right.
But the fact that they can actually reuse the processes and the tools that they have, but now they're driving application updates into very distinctly different infrastructures,
Yeah.
that's usually a big aha. And then they go on to think we have to monitor both
Right.
at the same time.
Interesting.
That's a big reveal.
So do they usually, because the data is being generated at the edge,
Yeah.
do they usually start with the cloud update first and then bring in, or like how is it dependent on the pipeline and?
It's kind of a good question. It's dependent on the pipeline. And this, again, I will tell you, there's precious little operational experience. You will not hear someone on a stage having fiery opinions about one or
really?
the other.
Yeah.
It's emerging now. So it kind of comes down to.
So what are you finding?
So we're finding that it's good to actually try it out.
Right.
And what we're finding is maybe that it depends on, we tend to think about the world in two ways. There's cloud out and edge in.
Right.
So cloud out is when we have users that have started with all of their applications in the cloud, but they've come to realize that for a variety of reasons, can be costs, can be response times, it can be outage capabilities. They need to move a subset of the applications to the edge. So they literally lift and shift stuff to the edge.
Okay.
They usually drive the lifecycle from the central components. So
Okay.
the central first,
Cloud
and
out.
then we'll follow. Yeah, and then edge in is when you have something like the point of sales systems from up until a couple of years ago were almost only at the edge.
Right.
But now they've moved certain capabilities to the cloud. Right?
Okay.
But that is usually then still driven by the components running at the edge or in the store.
Interesting. So depending on, so even within one organization, different applications, you're going to have different ways. So do you have a testing framework that you recommend as far as putting that together?
The good thing for us is that since we're focused heavily on containerized applications, Docker or Podman containers, there's already a gigantic ecosystem for just that.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Certain parts of it needs a little adjustment because it's the edge.
Yep.
But things like what you're saying, that translates operationally into things like there's something called canary deployments. Usually if you have an application that you are going to upgrade and it's running in 2,000 locations, you usually don't push that upgrade in parallel at the same time.
All of them at
you
once.
usually start in a controlled fashion, maybe with a lab and then your trial place. And then you usually go through cohort upgrades. So you do maybe 50 at a time and you let it go for 2 days. So those types of things are kind of closely tied, or more closely tied to the developer kind of tool chain than other things. And it's profoundly impacted by the fact that it is the edge. It's not the central cloud.
So how much of what you're doing is around the actual containers versus the professional services to get people to understand how to use what you're providing?
So what we have is literally a container orchestrator. But you are right, in this kind of underserved or understood market, there's a lot of training as well. Not so much on the basics. People nowadays, when you walk around events, they understand what the container is, and then they don't. If you start asking detailed questions, they go like, But
it's not just about the container itself, it's about the process around the container.
So that we spend a lot of time. I mean, talking to you here, presenting at this event. We have a lot of, webinars, we write a lot of papers, and we get outsized interest around these things, which is both good and bad, right? The good thing is that it feels like we're moving forward. The more challenging part is that it is early stage. It still is early stage.
So let me ask you this. If there's someone out there who's a developer and is on a tech team, what are the things that they can look for in their own system that are sort of red flags that they may need you?
The number one thing, and we have a whole narrative around this, and we tend to think about the two personas we come across in enterprises. We've even given them names.
Okay.
It's one is called Patrick McEngine. He's the platform infrastructure engineer. Cares deeply about the infrastructure. The other one is Applifer Developers. She loves applications. She cares way less about the infrastructure, but a lot about the applications.
She just needs it to work on site.
And she doesn't want to call Patrick every time, right? She wants self-service experience. She wants a place to work from where she can actually own and manage the life cycle of her applications without involving Patrick and his team every step of the way. So if you are a Applifer or a Patrick that has an organizational setup or technical setup, that means that you have to have 5 to 6 meetings every time someone wants to deploy a new version. That's a huge red flag.
All right.
That's a huge red flag. You want to be looking for
too many update meetings, it's time to call Carl at Avassa and talk about how you can refine that process.
Yes, exactly. How we can separate the concerns and make it very comfortable for Applifer. And help Patrick build something that they can be proud of and that can support a multitude of Applifers.
Nice.
Yes.
All right. The Applifers and the Patricks of the world will be happy to meet you.
Yes. Sure.
I do have one final question for you that I like to ask everyone. When you look to the future of technology, is there a particular innovation or forward motion that you're either the most excited about or most curious about or something of that nature?
Yeah, I'm still, of course, I mean, this will be a mainstream opinion, but I'm still amazed by the fact that my son walks out the door every day conversing in French with a global AI in the cloud, preparing
nice.
for his French tests.
I love
Right?
it.
It is a really, I mean, people were wishing for
Why
the future.
have I not done that with my son in his French class?
He literally has a conversation walking out the door
I
with a
love
gigantic AI in the cloud.
Oh, so
Now,
genius.
interesting to see how that converts into our or my problem space, where there's a multitude of data sources.
Yeah.
And if you think about, the types of layers that we see, all the way from chassis temperature and fan speeds
Yeah.
in the hardware layer,
Yeah.
through to disks and all those kinds of things, and into the trained models themselves. I
Right.
bet you that there's a very interesting insights to capture from that and do something cool about. So I'm looking forward to a more mature, open and accessible actual training environment
Yeah.
that we can use to see what we can do with that.
What's possible for humanity with AI.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, my
Carl
pleasure.
Moberg
Thanks so
from
much for
Stockholm,
having
Sweden.
us. Thank you.
We're so happy to have the folks from Avassa here with us today, and check it out. We'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.